Today's video is brought to you by AlmostHeaven.com. Handcrafting at-home saunas since 1977. Want better sleep, less stress, and faster recovery? Now's the perfect time. Shop saunas, cold plunges, hybrids, and accessories. Use our exclusive code at checkout to save 5%. Link below.
We continue our journey alongside Bo Parrish. I'm Dave Erickson, and I really do like this topic, as much of it is a negative word, or at least we think the outcome is negative. There's a positive spin we can put on the topic of suffering, Bo, and the fact that really suffering is a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, Dave, and we so often take for granted the obvious requirements that we pursue as we move towards a greater purpose in life, and things such as hard work, determination, commitment, accountability. These are things that, well, they're obvious. We all know we need to engage in those specific activities. But when it comes to suffering, I feel like we do not give it the credit that it is actually due. And as you mentioned, I think it's safe to say that as a society in general, we tend to view suffering as a bad thing. We read of catastrophes happening all over the world. We hear of personal loss. We hear of people losing their jobs, physical illness. These are all forms of suffering that get painted by the media in a negative light because it's looking at the situation in the moment, and it's overemphasizing the loss, and it's underplaying the potential that can be picked up in that moment of loss. So when we think about our greater purpose or success in general, suffering is a key ingredient in that process that must be included as we move along that path.
This is really a key ingredient to success. You have to have this. I don't know if it's mandatory, but I think it should be expected, right?
Well, very rarely does someone set out on a journey that has taken time and preparation to plan and get there without any adversity, without any obstacles, without any challenges, without any setbacks. Okay, the world is an imperfect place, and oftentimes we ourselves are our own worst enemies. We know what it is in our hearts that we want. We know what we're capable of based on our abilities, but sometimes it's simply a matter of execution, where just because we know what we ought to do doesn't necessarily mean that we do it. Now, that's just a case of personal accomplishment. But if you look at it from a broader perspective, every single one of us on the face of the earth is living some current version of ourselves. Now, we've stated before that no one is perfect, yet we all have a purpose. And our purpose is unique. It's what makes the world go around. It's what makes it interesting. It's what creates opportunities for relationships. If we were all exactly alike, it would be a very boring, dull existence. And so because that we all have different purposes, we're all going to be on different journeys. Some of us are athletically inclined. Some of us are musically inclined. Some of us have a gift for business leadership. Whatever facet of life that we've been called to, as we pursue our own unique purpose, taking into consideration that it is something other than what we're living right now, as we attempt to make forward progress, we are going to experience suffering in some form or fashion. And it's getting comfortable with that very notion, coming to that realization that before I set off on my destination, that being my greater purpose, I know that my plans aren't going to go according to plan. And we could very loosely define that as a form of suffering. So the question is not if suffering will occur, but when suffering will occur. And when it occurs, are we capable of turning the burden into a blessing, of turning the setback into a setup, of turning an obstacle into an opportunity? Because once we can learn to make that transition, we can truly experience the positive side of suffering going to work for us. Because as it is working through our system, we are realizing in the moment, hey, this doesn't feel good. This hurts. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical. It can be mental, it can be emotional. But if we can just stick to it and keep that bigger picture in mind, that being the point at which we're trying to move, then all of a sudden we can make suffering work for us rather than against us.
So you've said this before about being comfortable, get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable, and in this case, maybe planning for the pain, mentally or physically. And it all depends on what we're trying to accomplish, right?
Without question. Let me just give you an example. So I was talking to a brand new financial advisor in Atlanta yesterday morning, and this guy couldn't have been more than 25 years old. And there is a certain standard in the world of investment management, is that the younger you are, the more energy you have, but the less experience you have. Whereas the older you are, the less energy you have, but the more experience. And so the way that the industry has evolved now is that when young guys or girls are hired into the business, they are matched with a mentor who is 20, 30, maybe even 40 years further down the path that they are pursuing. And the mentor's purpose is to sit in on potential new client meetings, to provide insight based on their own experiences, and to encourage and guide as these younger minds developed. And so I was talking to him specifically about his primary focus at this stage in his career, which number one is staying out of the office. Dave, another thing about young financial advisors is they tend to see themselves as experts, and that anyone, just because of their own eagerness, is going to take the time to meet with them. And they would very easily see $10 million accounts turned over to their possession just because they asked for it. Well, that is a huge disservice. And so rather than trying to sell him on research information, which the company that I represent provides, I encouraged him. I said, look, the more time you spend outside of the office meeting with people, anyone who is willing to sit down with you and listen, the better off you're going to be. Because the thing about investment management is you've got to first have money to manage before you can call yourself an investment advisor. And Dave, he didn't like that. I could tell he was uncomfortable with that, because staying out of the office requires getting out of your comfort zone. It requires asking questions where you can very easily face rejection. It requires hearing no more often than you want to hear no, all of which has the potential to break down your confidence. So the way we concluded the call, and his name was Kevin, I said, Kevin, you need to find your comfort zone and then leave it, never to return. Because the more no's you get, the better off you're doing and the closer you are towards that yes that you so desire to have. And the more time you spend doing this, the thicker your skin is going to become, the greater your resilience is going to grow, and ultimately you're doing the hardest thing that you could possibly do at a time when your energy is at the greatest. So that was just an example, but think about starting any new business. You've got an idea. and you feel like it's the next best thing that could reshape the face of society today. But what you must do at that point is immediately take into consideration all the sacrifices that you're going to have to make in order to make that idea a reality. Now, these are all benefits of suffering that we're considering, because nothing happens with a snap of the fingers. Nothing happens because we want it to happen. Great intentions are worthless without action. Consistent, repeated steps that we know are absolutely necessary to get there. Are we willing to go through that suffering to become that better version of ourselves?
I know we didn't use P as patience. I know it was perfection in this series, but I really find patience is key to this, because my example or my experience to you is, I work on my timeline, and if I want something done, I can do it now versus having to wait for somebody else's timeline or having to go through corporate hoops. And I don't know if this is it. You can correlate the level of suffering required for the level of success that you want to achieve. Do they go hand in hand? Do they have to be at equal levels to to end? Do you have to have a level 6 of suffering to have a level 6 of success?
You know what? That's actually a very unique observation, because at some point, what we're looking at is a trade-off, an opportunity cost, if you will. Whereas you and I, we both operate on our own terms, and I think the work world is becoming much more portable today, as opposed to even 20 years ago, where we're looking at a free agent marketplace, where the value in the workforce is the creative genius that is the inner workings of each individual that work largely more and more on a consulting basis as opposed to a full-time employee. So when you have your own timeline and you are in pursuit of your daily deadlines, which are required with your projects, then the suffering becomes even more internalized, because you understand what your abilities are. As a matter of fact, your finished project. We were just talking about one of your YouTube production pieces that you just finished. And in your mind, there's nothing better. So what do you do with what you've just produced as far as making that available to the world, to where everyone who is surfing the web and has a desire to use YouTube is better served by what you have produced and put out there? So yes, there is a suffering, and that suffering is, how do I get this message out there? Because whereas your expertise is in production, you are building your marketing prowess. Marketing, different than sales. Marketing is, how do I take a message and create awareness? Whereas sales is actually converting that awareness into an actual sale or a product. And so there's a fine line between the two, but you're figuring it out. And I would actually say, Dave, you are in the process of suffering as we speak, and you're turning it into a positive thing, because you're not allowing it to cripple you. You're not allowing it to discourage you. That's not to say that we're not going to get frustrated, but you're accountable. If nothing else, you're accountable to me, because you've made your journey transparent, and I know how you're going about building this, and I can check in with you. I can do things like, Dave, tell me how your trip to San Fran went. What'd you learn? Oh, yeah, well, why is that valuable to your audience at Everyman Driver? And you reiterate to me, which increases your conviction on why it is you're doing what you're doing. And at the same time, it gives you greater determination to make this thing a full-time position, which you're well on your way to doing.
I think so much about the mental preparation of the expectation of suffering, and it's a prerequisite to success. And going into it knowing this will happen. And we can relate this to endurance sports. We can actually relate this to relationships, knowing that it's not going to be easy. And that mindset going into it can set us up for success.
No question. No question. So you think about any time there's a gap between your expectation and your experience, one of two scenarios are going to result. Again, we're talking about the difference between your expectation and your experience. Anytime those two do not line up perfectly, there's either going to be disappointment or there's going to be happiness, joy. Whereas the gap is either going to be a shortfall or a surplus. And I guess in the case of a surplus, I shouldn't call it a gap. I should call it abundance. And just think about when you were the last time you were delightfully surprised. Perhaps you took Melissa out for a fancy dinner and some admiring fan of Everyman Driver was in the restaurant and sent a bottle of wine to the table. Well, you certainly didn't expect that. But your experience was, hey, there's a bottle of wine being provided to us that I didn't pay for. I am overjoyed by that. Or on the flip side, anytime, and unfortunately, I think we can all relate more to unexpected surprises that throw us into a tailspin, getting cut off in traffic, having been told one thing and experiencing another by a repairman or a contractor or anything like that, well, there's frustration. So speaking more to the frustration, yes, that is suffering, but that's also an opportunity or what I would like to call a character building experience. So as we endure the suffering, yeah, it sucks in the moment, but if we can look past the moment and see the benefit, that is a better version of ourselves, which puts us in a better position to handle a similar level of suffering in the future. Because if it's happened once, if we've been disappointed once, we're going to be disappointed again. So it's being able to plan for that pain, for that frustration, for that suffering, that puts us in a better position to deal with it in the moment when it actually happens. Does that make sense?
It does. It's a matter of being optimistic and being able to almost foresee the future, knowing that you're going to get there. It's just a matter of time, weather this storm. It will happen, and to be positive. I know there's all these different letters we're going through in this series. It's like there's multiple opportunities to talk about a different phase of that letter, and I know we've gone over P and O already a couple of times, but uh, I look forward to suffering because I know it's temporary, just like pain.
Well, it is. And one of the P's that you mentioned before, which I'll go back to, is just the whole patience. I mean, patience is the absolute missing link, or what I would like to call the secret to success. You know, if there is a secret, it is a lot of time, effort, and energy that can't always be seen when we start out. You know, one of my favorite quotes ever actually came from the movie Wall Street. It said, "You want to know the secret to overnight success? 30 years of blood, sweat, and tears." So it doesn't happen overnight. If we can give ourselves the time because we believe it's going to happen, that patience is going to make us better bearers of suffering.
Well, this was a pleasure, Bo. There was no suffering in this episode for sure. It was all gold. It was great. Thank you.
Dave, had fun, my friend.
All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Looking for a great at-home sauna at a great price? Get 5% off any indoor or outdoor sauna, cold plunge, or infrared sauna from Almost Heaven with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at checkout. For over 40 years, Almost Heaven saunas have been trusted as the top American home sauna manufacturer. Almost Heaven saunas deliver high-quality products and firmly stands behind the holistic benefits the sauna brings to your mind and your body. Again, get 5% off any order with my discount code DAVE, 5% off at almostheaven.com. There's also a direct link below this video.